Hello class, this is Mrs. Gregorio. Today we are covering Chapter 1, Lesson 6 on solving proportional relationships. Please take out your books and follow along with me on page 55. To begin, I would like you to do the real world link. It reads, Katie and some friends went to buy fruit smoothies. They go to a health food store that advertises a sale of 2 fruit smoothies for $5. At this time, I would like you to complete questions 1 through 3 on page 55. Pause the video now to work those out, and then continue along when you are finished. Now, looking at the top of page 56, our key concept today is to write and solve proportions. Well, you need to know what a proportion means. A proportion is an equation stating that 2 ratios or rates are equivalent. So to begin, I would like you to look at these 2 fractions. Now this is algebraic writing. A over B represents a fraction of 2 different numbers. It equals C over D, which is another fraction with 2 different numbers. Notice that B cannot equal 0 and D cannot equal 0 because those numbers are in the denominator. Now, in order to figure out the relationship between these 2 fractions, I would like you to take these notes on your work zone area on the left side of your worksheet. A over B is equal to C over D. Now, if I wanted to get rid of the denominator B here, the way to get rid of a denominator, since it's being divided, is to undo division. The opposite of division is to multiply. So I'm going to multiply both sides of the equal sign by B. Now you have B in the numerator and B in the denominator. B over B cancels out to 1. Now I'm going to do the same thing with the denominator of D over here. Since D is being divided, I want to undo that division, so I'm going to multiply it times D to both sides of the equation. This is going to get rid of the denominator because D over D cancels out. So now I am left with A times D equals C times B. We can rewrite it as AD equals CB to show the multiplication. Now, if you notice, the numerator A over B equals C over D. This numerator A can be multiplied by the denominator D. A times D. And it's going to be equal to B times C, which is the same thing that was written over here. So again, we have AD equals BC or CB. The order doesn't matter because multiplication says that it is commutative. You can change the order. So when you multiply the numerator and the denominator, this is something called cross products. And cross products is a way to solve proportions. For examples 1 and 2, we will be using the cross product method that I would like to continue to explain here. Now, instead of A over B, let's apply this with some real numbers. Let's say A is 6 and B is 8. Let's set this equal to C over D, or let's call C 3 and let's let D equal 4. In order to check, let's work with the cross product here. 6 times 4 equals the cross product here, which is 8 times 3. 6 times 4 equals 24, and 8 times 3 equals 24. There you can see it is equal to each other and it is proportional. Let's go to example 1. Example 1 says, after 2 hours, the air temperature has risen 7 degrees Fahrenheit. Write and solve a proportion to find the amount of time it will take at this rate for the temperature to rise an additional 13 degrees Fahrenheit. So to set up this proportion, we are going to compare temperature over time. So temperature will be in the numerator compared to the time it takes in hours. Notice temperature is in degrees Fahrenheit. Now, it tells us that in 2 hours, the temperature had risen 7 degrees. So I'm going to put 7 degrees Fahrenheit for the first 2 hours. It wants us to write and solve a proportion. Now that means when we solve proportions, we need to set it equal. And we need to find the amount of time it takes for the temperature to rise to 13 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, since it doesn't tell us the amount of time it takes, let's call the time with a variable t. So t stands for the time in hours. To solve this proportion, we can simply use the cross product method of multiplying 7 times t and setting it equal to 2 times 13. 7 times t can be simplified as 7t, and 2 times 13 makes 26. Now, in order to figure out the value of t, we need to divide both sides of the equation by 7. Since there's multiplication here, the way to undo the multiplication is to divide, do the inverse property. So since I divided the left side by 7, I have to keep it equal, so I'm going to divide the right side by 7 too. 7 divided by 7 cancels out to 1, and 1t, or written just as t, equals 26 over 7. Please use a calculator, and you will find that t equals 3.7. So the amount of time it will take is 3.7 hours. I would like you to try A, B, and C on page 56 at this time, and be prepared to share your answers with a classmate tomorrow. Going on to example 2. If the ratio of type O to non-type O donors at a blood drive was 37 to 43, how many donors would be type O out of 300 donors? So we are comparing 2 groups here. We have type O donors on top, and then we are comparing it out of the total donors. So this is the total amount of donors that we have. So looking at the ratio, we have type O to non-type O, which is 37 to 43. So the type O donors would be 37 people. Now it's asking on the denominator for the total donors. Now you might be tempted to write 43 in the denominator, but that is not the total. That is just the non-type O amount. To find the total, you will need to add 37 type O plus 43 non-type O to get the total, which in this case is 80 people. So 37 out of 80 people are type O donors. Now it's asking you, how many donors would there be if there were 300 donors? So the total is now 300, but I don't know how many donors that would be. In this case, I'm going to call it D and let D stand for donors. In order to solve this proportion, we can go ahead and use the cross product method. Multiply 37 times 300. Bring down the equal sign. And then let's multiply 80 times D. I'm going to simplify this 37 times 300 is 11,100. And 80 times D makes 80D. To solve for D, I want to undo the multiplication between 80 and D. The opposite of multiplying is divide. So we want this to cancel out to 1. Since 80 divided by 80 makes 1, it cancels out. But to keep it balanced, whatever I do to the right side, I also need to do to the left side. So I'm dividing that side by 80 as well. Using a calculator, I would like you to type in 11,100 divided by 80, and you should get a total of 138.75. And that equals D. Now, since D stands for donors, we cannot have a decimal of a person. We can only have whole numbers as people. So to answer the question, we might need to round up in this case. There are about, now looking at 138.75, I'm going to round up to the nearest whole, which makes it 139. There are about 139 donors that are type O. And this is out of 300 total. You've answered the question in a complete sentence. Now I would like you to try activity D on page 57. Please pause the video now and continue to work on D. Now, example 3 is a little bit different than using cross products. This is my preferred method to solve proportions, and this method is called using unit rates. So you can also use the unit rate to write an equation expressing the relationship between two proportional quantities. It reads, Olivia bought 6 containers of yogurt for $7.68. Write an equation relating the cost, or C, to the number of yogurts, which will be Y. How much would Olivia pay for 10 yogurts at the same price? So we're comparing the cost in dollars. So the cost in dollars over the number of yogurts, or the containers of yogurt. So I'm just going to put cost per yogurt. Now, looking at the first bit of information, we have $7.68 for the cost. And that will give you 6 containers of yogurt. If you would like, you can underline the important information. That helps you keep organized. Now the question is asking us, how much would Olivia pay for 10 containers of yogurt at the same rate? Well, first of all, I want to figure out how much would 10 containers cost. That's what I'm trying to solve. Now, if you think back to the unit price, we can figure out how much one yogurt cost. And once we know how much one yogurt cost, we can simply multiply that times the 10 containers. So to figure out the unit rate, I want 6 to become 1 in the denominator. The way to do that is to divide the bottom by 6. 6 divided by 6 equals 1. Whatever I do to the bottom, I also need to do to the top to keep it equivalent. 7.68 divided by 6. I'm going to use a calculator, and that gives me about $1.28 per container. So $1.28 per yogurt. Now, it tells you to let C be the cost and Y be the number of yogurts. So now we're going to write an equation. The cost of the yogurts is equal to the price for one yogurt times Y, which is the number of containers. So this equation, C equals 1.28. Y represents our equation we're trying to solve. Now, the number of yogurts we have is 10. So Y is 10 containers. So the cost is $1.28 times 10. You may not even need a calculator to work this out. $1.28 times 10 is a cost of $12.80. You can just move the decimal one time to the right to show the change in place value. So therefore, the cost of 10 containers of yogurt is $12.80. Okay. Let's move on to example 4. It says JC bought 8 gallons of gas for $31.12. Write an equation relating the cost, or C, to the number of gallons, G, of gas. How much would JC pay for 11 gallons at the same rate? We're going to solve this problem exactly like we solved example 3. So first of all, let's look at the unit price. We are comparing gallons of gas to the price. So this is price per gallon. $31.12 was the cost for 8 gallons of gas. Now, in order to figure out how much the cost for 11 gallons would be, let's first find the unit rate. The unit rate is going to be for 1 gallon of gas. In order to go from 8 to 1, let's divide the top by 8 and the bottom by 8, because 8 divided by 8 gives us a 1 gallon. Using your calculator, please type in 31.12 divided by 8, and that should give you $3.89 per gallon. Now, the cost of $3.89 is the cost for 1 gallon of gas. Now we need to write an equation for the cost. So C represents the cost, and G represents the number of gallons we're going to buy. The cost is dependent upon the gallons. The more gallons of gas, the more the cost. So cost is equal to the price, 3.89, times the number of gallons. Now it tells us that there are 11 gallons. So instead of multiplying it times G, I'm going to substitute G for 11. 3.89 times 11. When you multiply that with your calculator, you should get a total cost of $42.79. $42.79. So in a sentence, the total for 11 gallons of gas at the same rate is $42.79. At this time, I would like you to try example E on page 58. Pause the video and continue to work out the example E. Tomorrow in class, we will review the guided practice with a partner, and you will continue to work on the independent practice on page 59. I hope you have a great evening, and I will see you then. Bye-bye.